Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Another day in Trump land, another day of just disgrace. And not surprising, yesterday we talked about the Gallup poll that came out that said that the percentage of Americans who were extremely or very proud to be an American was at an all-time low. And not surprised, today you look at another poll out by the Nork Group at the University of Chicago that's saying that Americans are the unhappiest that they've been in 50 years. And again, you go back to the fact that, global pandemic, near recession, potentially, who knows, down the road. You've got all of the chaos coming out of the White House. You've got people in the streets. You've got chaos. Literally, things look like they're burning around us. And you have a leadership in Washington that is tone deaf at best. I would argue criminal in many aspects of their leadership, but tone deaf at the minimum. And today's bit was right there. This executive order that Trump signed today, with a bunch of policemen surrounding him, is one of these moments where you go, are you just not paying attention, or are you deliberately attempting to rile people up and make things worse? Look, some of the things that were in the executive order, not bad. Not bad. Might actually, possibly, maybe, could help. Doubt it, but you never know. Not a bad thing tracking people who have had multiple complaints against them. Maybe tracking when they go to department to department. Yeah, that makes sense. Not allowing the use of chokeholds. But unless, again, this is that weird moment where, a police officer feels his life's in danger. And you go, that seems to be an awful lot. And there was one of those moments where, as I'm reading through the reports of today's executive order, I happen to think of the woman, not far from where I'm sitting, over in Hummelstown, who, in the middle of winter, evidently shot a guy, multiple times in the back while he was laying face down in the snow with his hands up near his face. And she said she feared for her life. And you go, wait a second, how is it possible? You're standing behind somebody. They're face down in the snow, and you're behind them pointing a gun. How are you possibly fearing for your life? And this is my problem with, we're going to make an exception if you fear for your life. That's every time. That's every moment. There wasn't anything in this executive order that I think is going to be helpful in solving the problems that we have. And I'll be honest, as I tweeted out earlier today, anytime a guy in a police uniform with a cowboy hat is clapping over something that Donald Trump has done, be worried, because there's not much going to be in there that's going to benefit we the people. Look, am I on the side of the police when they're right? Yes. We need to have some bit of law and order. But you see these instances time and time and time again. And I know it's easy to second guess. I know it's easy to armchair quarterback. I get that. But there are moments where you just go, let it go. And that comes back, again, to leadership. That comes down to departmental policy. That comes down to the political side of all of this. And I point to the guy in Atlanta who was shot at the Wendy's. He fell asleep in his car. Drunk, most likely drunk. I'm not sure what the breathalyzer showed. But he fell asleep in the drive-through line, and the police came and knocked on the window and said, hey, wake up. Hey, can you move over? They gave him a field sobriety test. He failed. And then a skirmish happened. And off the guy ran with the cop's taser. Up until the point where they shot this guy in the back, I was with him. You don't want drunks driving around. Someone falls asleep in the car, you get them off the road. You arrest them when you need to. The second he started to run, did you have to shoot him in the back? And this is one of those moments where you go, it comes down to, it's not just a few bad apples. This comes down to policing. We see this way too often. I've always been a believer of, and it was always my view that you couldn't shoot somebody in the back. If you were going to claim your life was in danger, it had to be in danger. The video that we see, this guy was, he was running. And it's my view, you let him run. You've got his car. You've got his driver's license. You know who he is. You know where he's going. This was a simple DUI. And he's going to sober up. And he's going to realize, I really screwed up. And he's going to pay a massive fine, maybe spend a little time in jail. He's going to lose his license for a long time. But he's not going to be dead. And the last time I checked, DUI was not something that we executed people for. Now, I've had people say, well, the police department, they shouldn't even respond to that. That should be another agency. And there's the guy from CNN, W. Kamau Bell, who said, we should have someone go and take him home. And I'm going, well, I'm not there with you. The guy still broke the law. But not to the point where we execute them with summary judgment right there in the parking lot. And this is one of these moments where we have to have these conversations of what do we want from our police department. Look, I'll be honest with you. I wouldn't want to do the job. And, for the people who do, I give them credit for, getting up every day and doing the best they can. But it's these decisions that seem to be more frequent. And this us versus them kind of mentality that needs to be addressed. And this is that moment that I think absolutely has to happen. And my problem is we've got an administration, and today's executive order is another one of those moments where the Trump administration chose openly to side with the police over the protesters, which he called looters and rioters, and again missing the whole point of what people in the street are actually doing. And look, for somebody who despises democracy, I'm not surprised by that. But when we have someone like Trump who has authoritarian tendencies, when we have a right-wing government right now, a Republican-led Senate and a Republican White House, they're going to side with the extreme law and order side. And it's my view that we really need to, as a society, decide whether we want a militarized police department. I live in a small rural community. The last time I was pulled over by a local cop, there were 3 of them. And they came out looking like they just fell out of Afghanistan. We actually have a tank, from what I understand. I'm sorry, Mayberry didn't need a tank. And maybe we expect too much from our police departments, and this is part of where the conversation needs to go. Or maybe we do need more social workers. Maybe we do need to have more training. Maybe just a thought, we need to hire a different kind of people to be police officers. Anyway, today marks the 5th anniversary of Donald Trump's dissension down the escalator. And, 5 years ago today, I said that this guy, if he wins, is going to be a horrible failure. He is going to be destructive. The country will be much worse off for his ascending to the presidency. And, well, here we are 5 years later going, yep. Because today's gem, for those who didn't know, evidently while we're doing the the press conference there on police reform, somehow it took a bizarre detour into how we have great doctors and scientists who evidently are close to a vaccine for the coronavirus. And it's right there with when they came up with the vaccine for AIDS, which got everyone going. What exactly are you talking about? There's no vaccine, there's no cure. There are pills out there that help people who are HIV positive keep it from becoming full-blown AIDS, and it's something that you can live with for a period of time now. Once it goes to the full stage, it's over. And, again, I think he kind of caught himself, and, he then kind of backpedaled a whole bunch about something about a pill and a whole bunch of, just weird language. And again, this is another one of those moments where I look at this guy and I go, I'm sorry, I'm just struggling with this person in charge of our country in this moment in history, when there is so much that needs to be addressed, when leadership matters. What happened today was not leadership. What happened today was trying to throw a Band-Aid on something, and I believe it's going to actually make things worse, because you deliberately did not address the main concerns that a lot of minority communities have with policing and with our criminal justice system. Now, there are going to be some who say, but Rick, Donald Trump done a bunch on criminal justice reform. And it's about time someone did. This was a failure today. In my view, just that simple. An absolute failure. He could have done something much better and chose not to. And that's kind of where I'm with this administration. And also, this kind of, because as we're seeing across the country right now, I don't know if you know it. I know everyone wants to reopen and everyone wants life back to normal, and we want to go 1,000 people in a room. It's getting worse. And again, this is another one of those leadership moments. We see a lot of the southern states who, we're reopening and we'll show you how to do it, because we know having record numbers of people infected and the death rates are going to go up. And, they're already talking about there's potentially going to be another lockdown in the fall. There are a number of articles out today, saying, look, get ready for it, because we're seriously not taking the green zone stuff seriously. And I was having this conversation with the kids today, and I'm going, the green zone idea was a bad idea. It was a failure, in my view. I know red, yellow, green is simple, and all of us it's almost idiot proof, because all of us, we know green, we know yellow and red, we know it's like going down the street and driving. Yeah, I mean, I know it's meant to be idiot proof, that red is bad, yellow is, got to be really very, very, very cautious. But the green part is what gets me, because the green part tells everybody, it's okay, everything's great, go back. Go. Green means go. And what I saw today as I took the kids out into the real world were no one wearing masks, no one practicing social distancing, no one concerned about their fellow citizen. It's all hooray for me. And it really, really frightening, because what some of the reports are saying is, if you think the first go around was bad, just wait, because our tolerance for another lockdown is going to be less, and there's going to be a lot of ugliness. And we'll get to talk about that later in the second hour. I've got so much to get to. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Ben Jackson is going to be here to share some thoughts on today's executive order signing, maybe some of the chaos that we're seeing going on in the streets, and a little bit about evidently we're pulling out of Germany, or pulling down in Germany. I'll get some thoughts out of him on that as well. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Nothing more American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith. and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1918. That was the day Eugene V. Debs, leader of the Socialist Party, gave his legendary anti-war speech in Canton, Ohio. The speech, for which he would eventually be arrested, tried, and convicted under the Espionage Act. Though he avoided explicitly criticizing World War I or President Wilson, he made clear his views. He gave the speech at a park near the jail where Charles Baker, Charles Rutenberg, and Alfred Wagenacht, 3 prominent socialists, were being held on Espionage Act-related charges. Debs noted, quote, "It is extremely dangerous to exercise the constitutional right of free speech in a country fighting to make democracy safe in the world." Debs was defiant. He unloaded his rage against the judicial system and the conviction of socialist leader Kate Richards O'Hare for her anti-war views. He railed against the suppression of Max Eastman's socialist press and the ongoing persecution of socialists Tom Mooney and William Billings. Debs briefly reviewed the history of wars in Europe and made the following observation, saying, quote, "The master class has always taught and trained you to believe it is your patriotic duty to go to war and to have yourselves slaughtered at their command. But in all the history of the world, you, the people, have never had a voice in declaring war. The working class, who fight all the battles, the working class, who make the supreme sacrifices, the working class, who freely shed their blood and furnish the corpses, have never yet had a voice in declaring war or making peace." For this, he was convicted of advocating disloyalty and draft resistance and sentenced to 10 years in prison. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So to highlight the fact that we've got failed leadership from top to bottom, and you expect that from Trump. But number two, you think, Mike Pence got a little time in government. He was a congressman for a long time. He was a governor. You'd think he would have some bit of sense about him. Evidently not. Today at the White House, Mike Pence claimed that, quote, "in a very real sense, Oklahoma had flattened the curve." There are no 19 cases coming. He said that today their hospital capacity is abundant. The number of cases in Oklahoma has declined precipitously, and we feel very confident going forward with the rally this coming weekend. The only problem is Oklahoma, this past weekend, had its highest daily total since the pandemic began. And Tulsa as well had the single largest day increase that they've had since the pandemic began. So again, it's this mixed messaging or just flat out lying. So you take it for what you will. You can give them the benefit of the doubt, mixed messages, or you can go where I go, just flat out lying. And here to share some thoughts on, well, this, today's police reform executive order and whatever else we can bang around. I've asked our good friend Ben Jackson to come talk with us. Ben is a gun safety advocate and one of my favorite people. Ben, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, always glad to be with you.
So we flattened the curve in Oklahoma. It's nearly gone. Everything's wonderful. Forget about it.
I have to tell you, bringing a huge number of your supporters together in one place so you can get them all infected with a deadly virus is a bold electoral strategy. It's just, I don't mean to laugh about it, but it's just so stupid. I mean, it's just on its face stupid. And I get that, we're not dealing with a brain trust in the Trump administration. When Jared Kushner is the smart guy in the room, you're dealing with a bunch of morons. But I just don't understand how anyone listens to a thing that either of those two people say, Trump or Pence, and believes any of it. I just don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, it's the level of willful ignorance is scary to me. And, it's one of these things that, and I was having a conversation over the weekend of there are just some people who feel the need to be the contrarian. Our side's right, you're always wrong. And they're going to go to the mass extremes to prove that you're wrong, even though it's going to harm them. And I point to this case in Michigan. I don't know if you saw this story about these people in Walker, Michigan, who evidently are burning the letters that they're getting from the state, informing them that they have the right to an absentee ballot. So they're this is public defiance, saying, no, I'll burn my right before. It's insane to me.
Oh, first of all, forget the fact that it's not even like they're burning ballots, right? Like, which you could, I guess, take that as an act of protest. They're just burning a letter that says, hey, if you want, here's how you can get an absentee ballot, right? That's it. That's all the letter says. And they're like, this makes us so mad that they're informing us of our rights. I don't know, Rick. It's kind of, I don't even know what to say about it, how stupid it is.
No, it's one of those things where you've fallen down the rabbit hole and you keep falling.
Right. I feel like these are people who, if Liberty University opened an Alex Jones School of Public Discourse, these people wouldn't even be accepted to that, right? Like, we're not dealing with the top tier of intellectual capacity here, but I think it speaks to a really scary problem. I mean, you sort of talked about this sort of chimneying that we have, where people are stuck in our way is right no matter what, where if anybody with half a brain sat down and thought about it for a second, they'd be like, this is not a big deal. We got a letter that says, hey, you can do this if you want, which, by the way, is state law that Michigan citizens voted for, that people could, in fact, obtain these absentee ballots. And the Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, there was just doing her job in informing the citizens that they had the right to do a thing that they voted themselves the right to do, right? Like, this is exactly how government and democracy is supposed to work. And then you had Trump send out this stupid tweet calling her a rogue Secretary of State for doing her job, and initially erroneously saying that she sent out ballots, which she did not do. And these people are just, like, insane. It's this, it's like they think that they're burning witches, but they're really just burning letters.
Yeah. No, you're right.
It's scary.
And it's one of these things, it's this blind faith that I struggle with. And I know there are some people who are, there's just no talking to them. They're fives, leave them alone. You're never going to reach them. But at some point, for the sanity, for the good of the country, for some bit of unity and maybe solving some problems, we have to engage them on a certain level. No,
you know what? I don't know. I don't know if everybody is engageable. I think we should try. I think it's the job. I think that's exactly what Jocelyn Benson was doing in Michigan, is engaging, it's government engaging literally every citizen. They didn't send these to Democrats. They didn't send them to Republicans. They sent them to registered voters, right? And that's what we're trying to do, or that's what she was trying to do. And some people are just not going to engage, and you can't change everybody's mind. And the government should be trying to do that. But I don't think, honestly, there is anything that you or I or any media outlet or any person who evaluates truth can say to these people that will change their mind if Trump says that's not true. Right? Like, I just don't think they're reachable.
That's the scary part. And the number is about 39% of this country, which is really frightening. When when I was a kid, you always had a couple of wing nuts. You always had the tinfoil hat crowd.
Right.
You had the people who were listening to Art Bell at 3:00 in the morning on the radio and listening to conspiracy theory. You always had those, but they were kind of off to themselves. They were kind of separated. They found each other.
Right. They've all sort of conglomerated. I grew up in New Hampshire, where we had Lyndon LaRouche lived there. And we had a whole bunch of Lyndon LaRouche supporters. And they were, even when New Hampshire voted for Pat Buchanan in the Republican primary, we were still pointing and laughing at the Lyndon LaRouche people. But man, it's like they're all Lyndon LaRouche people now. The whole Republican Party almost is that group of people. And it's bolstered by Trump's arrogance, where he just says, whatever he wants to be true, he just says that this is true. And they are just as arrogant in that, thinking that we couldn't possibly be wrong. Trump said it, and we know that he's right about everything. And therefore, and they do this under the guise of patriotism, which is especially scary because it's the exact opposite of patriotism. It's taking the word of the executive as opposed to the word of the Constitution and the word of law and the word of reality. It's anti-American. Burning the notification that says you're allowed to vote, that you have a right, and then burning that notification, it's anti-American. It's scary. It's Ray Bradbury would love it and hate it.
Exactly. But here's the thing: they showed us, didn't they?
Oh yeah. I mean, they're going to be real mad when other people get ballots, and they don't. But
it's crazy. Let's move on to today. Yeah. The big reform. Before I throw my thoughts in, I'm curious yours.
So, to some degree, I think that as white guys, it's our job right now to follow, and that we have that we've had a good long run, and we've done a lot of bad things with it, and right now we're not the people who are suffering, and the people who are suffering are continuing to say, as they have been for the entirety of my lifetime, but especially since Rodney King and then Michael Brown and then Tamir Rice and Trayvon Martin and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd and Rayshad Brooks. This is a continuum, and black people have been saying over and over again, we need reform, we need reform, we need reform. And if you remember, SWAT was started by Daryl Gates in Washington. That's his invention, and that invention was designed to keep black protesters down, right? It was specifically designed to stop black people from being able to participate fully in the justice system in a normal way. And so police tactics that have been adopted around this country have been violent and militarized and aimed specifically at black people, whether intentionally or just by the way that it is done, through sort of the systems that we've put in place. And black people are leading the way out of it, and we need to listen to them and follow them. Outside of that, I would just say, I was a member of the military, and our police forces are militarized. And I don't just mean weapons, but I also mean the culture.
Yep.
They use military ranks, they use military ceremony, they use, saluting and training and all of that kind of stuff. And in the military, you are trained to do that because it keeps you separate. It keeps your unit cohesive against everything from the outside. You are designed to be separated from that. Police can't be that. Police have to be integrated into the society if they're going to be policing. And by demilitarizing police, demilitarizing that culture, and transferring non-police functions to non-police functionaries, like social work, like mental health intervention, like drug addiction specialists, like de-escalation specialists when you're dealing with neighborhood problems, you can free police to do things that are actually police business, while having more effective and less violent solutions to most of the problems that police are responding to right now, to which they're really just not qualified to.
Yeah, I mean, they're the last line of defense for our mental health system that's clearly broken. Right. But you brought up Mr. Brooks here a moment ago, and I had a long conversation, about that scenario. And I said, look, I was with the police all the way up until the point where they shot him in the back. Yeah. I mean, he was asleep in his car. They were called because he was probably drunk, and from what I saw in the video, he failed the field sobriety test, probably failed the breathalyzer as well, and then he ran. Right. And I was up with him up until the point to where they shot him. They should have just let him go. They had his car. They knew who he was. They knew where he lived.
Right. There was no reason for that to get violent. And at the end of the day, they're saying he turned at us with a weapon. Well, they knew what that weapon was. He took it from them. It was a taser. And, they use tasers because they're not generally deadly weapons, right? So they knew he didn't have a deadly weapon. They knew he was running away. And then he turned and continued to run because they shot him in the back. And it's like, they couldn't have done it more wrong, really, from the get-go, and it's coming out today that the officer who fired him had multiple complaints against him.
Sure.
And this is the thing that we're finding in a lot of these cases that.
But let me ask you this, Ben.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, look, if you're involved in a resisting arrest scenario, and a lot of policemen are, aren't you going to have complaints? I mean, I've known a lot of cops over the years, and some of them good, some of them bad, and they've all had complaints. Is that the mirror that we look at this through?
Well, here's the thing: is we don't know, because generally speaking, laws that were really pushed into place by police unions have broadly made these processes secret, right? That, in my town, I just had this with our select people today. Police discipline, and this is true in all of Massachusetts, has to be held in town government in executive session, meaning it's not open to the public, right? And so we don't know what these complaints are. Are they frivolous? Are they not? What's the disposition of them? It's not public. And so we have no idea whether that's the right mirror to look into or not. But I do think we can look at that mirror in a couple of ways. I believe the cop who is charged with murder in George Floyd's case, I believe the number, and I'd have to double check this, but he had 18 specific complaints against him. And if you have a force of officers who, say on average, have one complaint a year against them, and somebody has 6 complaints a year, we can tell you that person is engaged in situations that are generating complaints more often, right?
Right.
But that information isn't readily available to the public, and that's a real problem. So we don't have a really effective way to do this. And I know you and I are both normally very pro-union guys, but I will say that police unions and regular unions are two very different things. Police unions are, generally speaking, there to protect police officers specifically from the consequences of their actions. They are not nearly as involved in the benefits, salary, sort of protection of job as a class type work that most labor unions are involved in. They are, when an officer is being investigated by internal affairs, they don't bring a lawyer; they bring their union rep. Right, and that is because the unions are there to insulate police from the consequences of their actions. And,
but that's what, just to back up a little bit, but that's what unions are supposed to be doing. Unions are there to protect workers' due process. And I'm a big supporter of due process for every person. And, it seems to me to be a cop-out to blame the police unions.
Well,
and look, I'm not a big fan of either the police or the police unions. But to use the convenience to go after the police unions is one of those things that it's lazy bureaucrats, it's bad law, it's a lot of stuff on top of it as well.
Well, I have to partially disagree with you there, in that I think that police unions have put through a lot of bad law, and that it's not lazy to go after that part of it, and that police unions have a really serious role in corrupting the enforcement of criminal justice in the way that criminal justice is corrupted, because they've allowed police the ability to work with impunity to a large degree without consequences for their actions. They've been complicit in that process, and we have to look at that. We have to look at that as we're dealing with that. And believe me, I'm not saying in any way get rid of police unions. I am saying that we have to reform how police unions function, and that we have to have elected leaders who have the ability to stand up to police unions when it comes to putting in a law that is police are there to serve the public. And when laws are put in place to protect police who fail in that duty by committing violence, by putting bias in their policing, that's a real problem. And you can point to all over the country where police unions do this. And I think, if you look at the police union boss in New York last week when he stood up and said, "You're treating us all like animals," it was kind of shocking. And so, I think that we have to, certainly they are not the sole place to look, but I think that we have to look at them as we're examining the entire criminal justice system. We have to look at city and town governments. We have to look at prosecutions. It doesn't just stop at policing.
Yeah, no, it's not just, and it's just not that. And I don't buy the just a few bad apples mentality either.
Nor do I. It's systemic.
Absolutely.
You can say you can have an officer in a town who in his he or she could be in their heart completely believing in equality, completely anti-racist in their hearts and in their beliefs, But I almost guarantee you that if you look at their stop arrest, their stop reports, the people they detain, the people they search, the people they arrest, the people they charge, the people they prosecute, there's going to be a bias in those numbers, right? And so,
well, what do you say to that point? I mean, because the response I get every time I bring that up is, well, they're the ones committing the crimes.
I think that's just patently false. First of all, I think that I think that if you were to single out white people in the way that you singled out black people for attention from the police, you would find that white people are committing those crimes just as much, right? But I think the problem begins with police are more likely to pay attention to black people. Police are more likely to pay attention to felons. And our criminal justice system has created a system of enshrined felons.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So that you end up with this culture of recidivism when it's not recidivism in a way that is true, but it's this manufactured inherent racism structure that's in our policing. And we talk about police a lot, and police do need to be reformed. But like I said before, it's not just police prosecution; it's jailing, it's interventions in the schools. You talked about school resource officers, and these officers are much more likely to discipline and interact with students of color, right, in negative ways, as opposed to in positive ways with white students. So it starts from a very young age. We create these self-fulfilling prophecies, and we have to fix all of it, right? We can't just fix banning chokeholds and be like, high five, we did it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no executive order is going to fix all of that. You're absolutely right. But Ben, I appreciate the thoughts and the time. Something I'm sure we're going to talk about numerous times over the next several months, because I don't see this going away anytime soon.
I agree with you, Rick, and I'd be glad to be here anytime.
Good stuff. I appreciate it, Ben. Thanks so much.
Talk to you soon, my friend.
Our good friend Ben Jackson. Make sure you check out his work over on Twitter. You can follow him at Dad of the Decade there as well. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1836. That was the day that the London Working Men's Association was founded. Skilled craftsmen started the organization. William Lovett, a cabinet maker, and a publisher by the name of Henry Hetherington were two of the original founders. Their aim was to promote the rights of the working class. 2 years later, the group drafted the People's Charter. The document outlined a demand for 6 reforms aimed at making the government more inclusive of the working class. One reform was universal suffrage for all males over the age of 21. Another was ending the requirement that members of Parliament hold property, which excluded most British people from standing for elections. The charter also called for the establishment of fairer parliamentary electoral districts, holding of annual elections, and allowing for a secret or anonymous ballot. The final item was payment for those elected to Parliament. Since it was an unpaid office, people who could not afford to go without a salary were practically shut out of running. Those who supported these measures came to be known as Chartists. The movement grew and garnered support. More than 1 million people signed a petition for the charter. Parliament, however, ignored the petition, but the movement continued to grow. It inspired newspapers, rallies, and even poetry. One poem published in 1841 included the lines, "'Tis the voice of the people I hear on high. It peals o'er the mountain, it soars to the sky. Its shock, like the earthquake, shall fill with dismay the hearts of the tyrants and sweep them away." Chartism as a movement lasted for 2 decades. But it was not until 1918 that all British men won the right to vote. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I got to tell you, again, I look at the executive order and some of the things that they've included in it, and this was window dressing, and the fact that there were policemen all around, and I didn't see any. I didn't see any of the stakeholders in this entire this whole situation there. I just saw, honestly, the first thing I saw was a big white guy in a police uniform with a cowboy hat on. And as I said at the beginning, anytime I see a big guy in a police uniform with a cowboy hat on applauding our wannabe authoritarian dictator, I worry. I worry a lot. I'm here to share some thoughts on what the executive order, what it will do, what it won't do, and maybe what needs to be done. I've asked Arthur Ago to come talk with us. Arthur is the director of the Criminal Justice Project at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. Arthur, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
So walk me through this. What is in this executive order that some of my conservative friends are saying this is the answer? This is Donald Trump did the right thing today.
I hate to say it, Rick, but there's an absolutely minimal amount of things in this executive order. There's 4 main points that the executive order tries to establish, tries to create in this country, but none of it really is effective. The first point would be the encouragement of certifying police forces. Basically, if these police forces, number one, adhere to all laws, they promise to do that, and number two, they prohibit chokeholds unless deadly force is necessary, or unless deadly force, rather, is allowed to be used in that situation, that police force will be certified. That doesn't establish anything new.
Police are supposed to follow the law. They're not supposed to kill people, so no change. Okay, next.
No change there. Next is it would establish a Department of Justice database to track essentially bad cops. What that means is cops who have been decertified, cops who have been terminated from their employment as cops, cops who were criminally convicted while on duty, and cops who have had a civil judgment against them, enforced against them for an improper use of force. There is an exception, though, and which the Attorney General can use, which is as long as those cops were afforded fair process. That's not defined by the executive order. It allows the Department of Justice to excuse them from providing information for the database, and more importantly, really, the database is not something that's required. In other words, police forces are not required to report this information to the Department of Justice. They're given money to encourage the reporting, but they're not required to report it.
See, to me, that was the part of this that you go, that's a step forward by mandating, and you're telling me that it's not a mandate, it's a suggestion. So, by mandating that we know who the complaints are against, and that it's public, to me, that would be a huge thing, but it's not, as you've said, not mandatory.
No, it's not mandatory. And one way to think about it is to compare it to the Justice and Policing Act of 2020, which was put forward. I can't remember which day last week. The days are all blurring together. But this is now up for debate in front of the full House. But let's talk a little bit about the Justice and Policing Act and what they're requiring for accountability and keeping databases. And it also provides money for the data collection of state police officers and their conduct. But it mandates, and this is where the federal government is allowed to mandate something, and where the president was allowed to mandate something, but he failed to do. It mandates the collection of federal law enforcement stops, frisks, detention data, data that's related to all of those things, and race and use of force. And it mandates a database that includes the person who's stopped, et cetera, their race, sex, age, religion, and whether or not they have a disability. And all of those things with specificity go beyond just the decertification and termination of police officers. I mean, the reality is that if a cop, if let's say that I'm a cop, all of a sudden I'm applying for a job in another jurisdiction. A good police force a good supervisor in a police department will call that other jurisdiction and say, hey, you ever had any problems with this officer? What's going on with him? And that other police force, if they're not restricted by anything, will say, no, he was terrible. We had to fire him, right? There's nothing that DOJ database expands on, not unlike the Justice and Policing Act of 2020, which requires specific statistics and ties those statistics to a specific amount of money.
Right. Or the other side of this, they could say he was the greatest cop we ever had. I'm sorry to see him go. You'd be lucky to have him just to get rid of him.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. That's exactly right. Is that you want to encourage the hiring of good police officers that are sensitive, that are fair, that treat the community with fairness, that treat that treat people regardless of the color of their skin with fairness. That's what you want to encourage the hiring and retention of. And so, yes, if you were going to create a database to track bad cops, that system should be happening anyway. I mean, if I leave my job and I go to and I apply for another job, who's the first person that my other job is going to call? My old job, right? And
right.
So this is not really any advancement at all. And that's the second part of the executive order out of four things. So.
And, again, it's these half measures that, as I said at the beginning, I think this executive order, in looking at how it was put forth and framed, and the photo ops that came out today, I think it's actually could make things worse.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Rick, the whole world is watching, let alone the United States. Everybody is watching what's happening in this country right now. And the people that are demonstrating in the street, the people that are advocating for fundamental change, not only in policing, but in the criminal justice system and criminal justice systems at the state level around the country, are watching what this president is doing. The optics of today's press conference were terrible. There was not a single family that I saw, and I could be wrong, but not a single family of a victim of police misconduct or police violence.
Now, the only pictures I saw were all policemen. They were all applauding, and this is wonderful. And I'm going, I don't know that those are the folks that, we should be talking about policing themselves. Just kind of a thought.
Right. No. That's exactly right. Is that, I hate to say it, but the earliest modern example of what's going on today was 1967 in Watts. And things haven't changed from 1967 to 1992 to 2014 to 2020. Every major uprising in an American city had to do with police mistreatment of African American and mostly men, some African American women, but mostly men. And the problem is that police forces have not heard that issue. They have not seen the problem. And so when you have the optics today of the president signing this executive order in front of all of these police officers without a single member of a single family member there or a single member of a community organization that's advocating for change, it just shows that he does not understand the history of the problem in this country.
Yeah.
And the executive order shows it. No,
I said at the beginning, he's tone deaf or he clearly wants to make things worse. But one of the things that you could make an argument that the executive order might be possible, and you give me your thoughts on this, is that they want to put social workers or mental health professionals with law enforcement on calls that are supposedly with people who are suspected of having mental health issues. Do you see that as something positive? Because, when I look at it, I'm going, maybe we should have mental health professionals going with the policemen for them more than dealing with everybody else.
Yes, I 100% agree that there are a substantial number of, it's more than substantial. There are not a lot of places that keep statistics on this. San Francisco is a really good example. I think that the number is upwards of 90% of the calls are coming in for non-traditional police activity, like police assistance that's required. So, for example, mental health calls, drug addiction calls, other types of nonviolent calls that are related to mental health or drug addiction. And exactly right. You should be having social workers on the front line. You should have people like that, mental health professionals, that are trained, that understand how to de-escalate a situation, that understand how to reach a person, to calm them down, to have them relax. One of the dangers, though, with the executive order is it does encourage mental health, addiction, and homeless experts, in other words, social workers, to work with police officers to go out on these calls. The problem is it also provides money for training for police officers on mental health and addiction and homelessness, which is fine, except it encourages the continued use of police officers to treat those problems. They shouldn't be doing it.
Right.
There's so many examples of it. There's this great video of this poor man in Los Angeles that was having a breakdown. I'm not sure if you saw it, but Denzel Washington just happened to be driving by, and he stopped and he calmed the man down.
Yep.
He was sort of acting up. Yep. And so that's the kind of person that you want as a first responder, not someone that's going hand in hand. And in fact, you can when you watch the video, you can see the man becoming agitated when the police show up. Really what you want is social workers coming out on the front line. They're the first responders. The police aren't there, or they're not visible. They're in the background. And the social workers try to calm the situation down, and the police step in only when absolutely necessary.
Yeah, there was I remember a while ago, and it's probably going back a couple of years, where a guy was having a mental breakdown, and one of the social workers went out to sit next to him and talk to him, and they end up shooting the social worker.
Right. This is in Florida, I believe. I'm not exactly sure what town or what city in Florida. But
I just remember. I remember going, "You shot the social worker? What sense did that make?"
Right. It was crazy, and I think that what was happening was this guy was sitting down. He was, I believe, on the spectrum, on the autism spectrum, and so not very communicative. I should say, not verbal. And playing with a toy car, I think it was. And it was crazy that the police showed up and they thought that there was a dangerous situation there, when his caseworker, it's not just any social worker, but his caseworker, I think the situation was sitting there next to him.
Yeah, now fortunately he shot him in the leg and he didn't kill him, but still, the guy got shot for it. But here's one of these things, though, and the responses that I get from people, Arthur, are that, well, being a cop's a tough job. It's it's split second decisions. You've got to make those because the cops got to go home at the end of the night, which I agree with. Absolutely, without question. And there are some bad people out there. There are dangerous people out there. But, I look at this Rayshad Brooks, scenario at the Wendy's drive-thru. Last time I checked, we didn't kill people for DUI.
No, absolutely not. I mean, that was an absolutely terrible situation. And the worst thing about that situation was those police officers were, we have to believe, trained on force, deadly force, what amounts to deadly force in terms of what they're being faced with. And in none of the situations, like any of the split-second decisions that they were making that night, amounted to needing to use deadly force against Mr. Brooks. None of those situations. I mean, he takes a stun gun from them. The police know that a stun gun, and the reason they carry stun guns is they are considered non-lethal weapons.
Right.
So, that number one. Number two, he discharges the stun gun. It misses the police. You can't reload that stun gun in any sort of, if the stun gun hits you, you can shock someone until it runs out of charge. But if it misses, and it doesn't reload automatically. It's now useless. Now he's carrying what amounts to a yellow toy plastic gun, right? And so, at that point, the danger is over, and all he's doing is trying to run away.
Right, and this is where my point was. I was with the cops up until the point where they shot him in the back twice. They stopped. They knocked on the window. They got him moved over. They gave him the breathalyzer, the field sobriety test. He failed. They were going to arrest him. They tried to grapple with him, and then he took off. And I say, let him go. You've got his car. You've got his driver's license. Just go to his house and wait for him.
Right. And one of the questions is, it goes a little bit beyond the executive order, but it does go to police accountability, police standards, and police training, which everybody's sort of trying to reach these days in the conversation and the debates we're having around the country. One of the questions is, why do police lock up people who are drinking and driving? Number one, there's a fear that they're going to get back in their car and drive away, right? That's the biggest fear.
Right. And look, here's the thing. I know they do. So I worked in bars for years. I know as soon if you just gave them a ticket, because back in the old days they used to just give them tickets and say, have someone, and they got in their car and they drove and got another one.
Exactly. But how about a situation where the police say, you know what, it's going to take us as long to put these handcuffs on you, take you down to the police station, as to drive you home. We are driving you home. Your car is staying here. We're putting a boot on your car. You're not moving this thing. You're going home right now. And here's a citation to come back to court to deal with this later on.
Right.
That it is a total de-escalation of a man who, by all accounts, was a peaceful man, right, that had no violent history at all. And so drug driving is absolutely a serious situation. People should not be, drinking and driving. They are a danger to other people on the road. What's the solution? You get them off the road. You get them off the road immediately, and you make them come back to court another day, and you take their car, which, as a bartender, you couldn't do, right? You can't take their car, but but the police could. They have the ability to just throw a boot on that thing.
No, then that's the right thing. So I mean, I think most people I know, and I think we agree, today's executive order was a failure. And I don't even know I don't even know that it was the right-minded attempt before it was a failure. What would you have liked to have seen in this executive order if you had the opportunity to do something that you think would be positive? What would it look like?
Well, the problem with this president is that he is so adverse to what has come before, both Republican and Democrats who have come before him. A few years ago, President Obama established a task force on 21st century policing. Right. There were a lot of good policy positions that came out of that task force, that many of which were put into the Justice and Policing Act of 2020. Right? The blueprint was there. So the question is, if this president was worried about whether or not what came before was going to be effective, was worried about that it went too far, it didn't go far enough, he should have used that as a starting point to say, okay, let's go from soup to nuts and figure out here what works and what doesn't work. Let's start with hiring. Let's go to training. Let's go to, training on different things like use of force, what levels of force are necessary. Let's then go to police funding. So all of these things, this is a serious endeavor, and it can't be done off of the cuff with an executive order.
I agree.
Frankly, what looks like very little study of the situation.
No, because when I look at this, Arthur, I see a much, as someone who grew up in a poverty-ridden area, the problem is much bigger than just what the police are doing. There's so much societally that needs to be fixed that you just can't fix with, we're gonna pass a new regulation or a new rule on how police interact with people. It's so much bigger. There's no silver bullet in my view.
Right. That's exactly right. I think that's exactly right. And I think that what you have to do is you really have to be thoughtful about what you're doing, and you have to be thoughtful about what the country wants from you, I think. And so the failure is not getting community organizations and people who've been working in this area, people who study it, who teach at the university level and at the law school level. Also, fair enough, stakeholders, including police officers and police chiefs from around the country, to sit down and say, okay, this president can say, okay, I don't like the 21st, the task force, the report from the task force on 21st century policing. Let's start again. Fine, start again. And then you come up with an executive order that is effective, that talks about things like, what we are going to do is I'm ordering the Department of Justice to use discretionary funding to encourage training in the following very specific areas. This is all sort of very generalized. And when you look, you read between the lines of this executive order, it is trying to achieve things that, frankly, are already in place right now.
Right.
It's, I think that you use the term, is it window dressing? I don't even think it's window dressing. It's nothing new. It really is nothing new.
It doesn't even rise to the level of window dressing. There's something wrong there.
That's exactly right.
But I guess not surprising from this administration. So last question I've got for you, because I think people want to do something positive. I think none of us want to see a black man killed before our very eyes for something stupid. What should people be doing?
Well, I think that number one, that's a huge question, and so I think that you have to figure out what your role is in this sort of fight for fundamental change. A lot of people, all they can do is, they've got their day jobs. They should be continue to march, continue to protest, continue to do whatever it takes to agitate for change. But, come November or come, the remainder of whatever primaries that are left, I'm not even sure how many are left, frankly. It's all sort of a whirlwind to me right now. But whatever is left, to vote and to push candidates on very specific issues that they must educate themselves about.
There you go. Always comes back to the vote. Arthur, I appreciate the time. Really great talking with you. I hope you'll come back and share some more thoughts with us down the road.
It's my pleasure, Rick. Appreciate it.
Good stuff. Arthur Ago, Criminal Justice Project Director there at the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under the Law. Make sure you check out their work. We'll get links out. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
Everyone should wear a protective medical mask, but some ought to be in ski masks, like those favored by bank robbers and muggers. Zach Fuentes, for example, a former deputy chief of staff for Donald Trump. He resigned from the White House in January, looking for some sort of lucrative entrepreneurial future. Then, the pandemic hit. And as Trump's incompetent government quickly caused it to spread, Fuentes thought, aha, opportunity. By April, he had set up a corporate facade for hustling contracts to provide medical supplies to government agencies. Only 11 days after he opened for business, bingo! The former Trump aide was awarded a $3 million deal from the Department of Health to ship respirator masks to Navajo Nation hospitals that were being overrun by hundreds of COVID-19 cases. Fuentes was awarded the contract with little competitive bidding, even though he had no knowledge about medical supplies or experience in federal contracting, and even though his price of $3 per mask was triple the pre-pandemic cost of $1 each. Oh, he also had no masks, so he bought a batch from China. A bit hypocritical since Trump is frantically trying to blame Chinese officials for his own massive screw-ups in handling the pandemic in our country. Worse, the bulk of Chinese masks he procured turned out to provide inadequate protection, were unsuitable for medical use, or were not the type he promised to deliver. So the Navajo people did not get the help they urgently needed. Fuentes and the Chinese supplier each made off with a bundle, and we taxpayers got mugged. This is Jim Hightower saying that is what happens when government is turned over to insider profiteers. At least these bungling bandits should have to wear scarlet masks so we can point them out to our children and say, don't let them control your future.
Hightower's commentary is brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown. From Wall Street to Washington, this monthly newsletter reveals who's doing what to whom and why. Check it out, hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So this time it's a Florida woman, not a Florida man. It's a Florida woman this time. Her and her 15 friends evidently have tested positive for the coronavirus after a night out at a bar there in Jacksonville Beach. And I love the statement that she said. She goes, we were doing everything right. We were doing everything right. And, well, the first night out, and look what's happened. She said she guesses it's just Murphy's Law. No, you weren't doing everything right. That was not right. So 16 more people in Florida. And not surprising, they've had some pretty good increases, as a lot of states in the southern part of the country have. And here to share some thoughts on where we are, because where I live, it's green, baby. Everything's wide open. That's why we've asked our good friend, Dr. Kelly Senholtz, to come talk with us. Dr. Senholtz, thanks for taking time for us.
Hello, good evening. How are you?
I am good. I'm looking at the woman from Florida and her 15 friends who decided they were going to go out and have a night on the bar, and now they're all sick.
You know what? I have no idea why we haven't heard 100 stories like this already. If you go to a bar and anybody in the bar has the virus, you're at high risk of getting it yourself. You're staying there for an hour. You're not wearing a mask. You're talking and laughing. It's all the things that make you get it. So we're going to be hearing a lot more of this.
Yeah, I mean, where I'm at, and I said this earlier, I took the kids out for ice cream. We don't do that very often. And literally nobody. There was no one who had a mask on, and they weren't even practicing social distancing. They were just lined up one after the other. It was sad to see. I mean, honestly.
We have a leader who's demonstrating the opposite behavior of what people should be doing, and people take their cue from what they see.
Right.
Interesting thing. Don't listen to what they say. Listen to what they do.
Right.
So Trump is giving lip service to mask wearing, but he's not wearing a mask himself. That is a prime example of what we need to be doing more and asking why. Why is he doing it?
No, it's an excellent point. But here's the sad thing. I mean, you look at states across the southern U.S., you look at Oklahoma, where there's going to be a huge rally in a couple of days. All the numbers seem to be going in all of the wrong direction. Florida, for instance, evidently they've set a record of almost 2,800 daily cases, as the state now has over 80,000. They seem to be peaking.
They're not peaking; they're heading up.
That's what I mean. They seem to be.
Yeah, they're going in the wrong direction. Now, I actually trained in Tulsa, and I know a lot of people there still. People who are sane are absolutely panicking. They're worried that this is going to be a giant explosion of infections. It's going to destroy the economy there. It's going to make their loved ones sick and possibly even die. They're really afraid. Even the Republicans there are really angry because if it does explode, they're the ones left cleaning up the mess.
Right.
So Trump flies into town, gets all of his accolades, leaves town, and Oklahoma is left in a raging infection for 9 months.
Right. And the reason I brought up the woman from Florida to start, because her and her 15 friends went to a bar, and all of them now have it. What happens if you show up to the 19,000-seat arena there in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and a handful of people have it? What percentage of that could possibly end up just exploding in that region?
We know from the prior epidemic of 1918 that when a large event like this was held in Pennsylvania, the amount of infections there raged. It was one of the largest areas of death and destruction for the virus from one simple parade. They held a parade, and it just destroyed the city. So, yeah, Trump could come into town, to one of his favorite towns, and absolutely destroy everything about Oklahoma. They could be sunk with massive infections for 9 months. They may be able to just barely get it under control when, wham, the fall infection hits us. Like, they could be in a hurricane of infection for more than a year. It could kill a lot of people, but he doesn't seem to care.
No.
The other thing I want to say is, on the question why, every time I talk with you, I say everything Trump is doing increases infection. You have to really look at what he's doing and not assume he's a normal person like we are and would want to decrease infections. People seem to be talking about it like he's making a mistake or somehow he's bungling the job.
No, I think
That's
he doesn't
not
care.
What this is. No. This is purposeful. If he just didn't care, there would be times when he accidentally did stuff that helped.
Okay.
If you go, seriously, like, this is what I do as an ER doctor. I look at the facts. People come in and they tell you stuff, but then you have to rewind it all in the background and say, what's really a fact and what do I not know? And what I know for sure is statistically it is impossible for him to have done things to increase virus every single time. He, just by by randomness, he should have done something right once or twice.
Yeah.
And then you look at what, so we've got Putin, we've got the president of Brazil, we've got the prime minister of the UK. The four of them have the four countries that are raging. They're all very closely aligned with Putin. And today an article came out in the New York Times outlining how Trump is making a massive amount of money off this virus situation.
So just so I get this right then. So you're saying that this is a money-making endeavor more than anything. Because I don't know that I'm going along with the, this is him and Putin figuring out how to control the world. This is just purely simply the kleptocracy on steroids.
Well, that's just what Putin is. Look at what Putin does. Again, don't listen to what he says or what people say about him. Look at what Putin does.
Right. Every
single thing Putin does has mostly to do with making more money because money is power. Power is his goal, but money is the currency of his goal. And so, yes, there is no way that it's a coincidence that those four men ended up having the worst possible viruses, and they keep having these horrible decisions that make it so much worse. The newspapers in the UK were full of this story this week, how bad decisions led here and here. That was the major story in the UK this week. So everybody's saying the same thing, but the problem is the majority of people are not sociopaths. So they think about things they hear or see in terms of what a normal person would do. And a normal person would want to decrease the amount of virus. He is not a normal person. So then you have to remove that filter and look at what is he doing and why is he doing it. And the fact is, he is at every turn, he's increasing the amount of virus. People are telling him, Trump, you could kill a lot of people by going in and having this event. He's not listening. He picked he made a slate of events to speak, and the 7 top virus cities in the United States are where he picked.
So you're saying that's not a coincidence. That's an on purpose.
No, that's not. And I don't think Trump's even smart enough to do all this. I really don't. He doesn't seem very intelligent. His vocabulary is limited. His ability to respond beyond a few set of trite responses is very limited. I think he's being coached. I think he's being guided. And when he gets something like this, let's say he talks frequently to Putin on the phone, privately with nobody else on. So he's on the phone with Putin, and Putin says, hey, you might want to go to these cities and have a talk. He doesn't know why. He doesn't know what. He just does what he wants. And once he knows what he's supposed to do, he's like a little kid, just do this.
Yeah, once you put something in his head, he now knows something.
Yes.
I've known people like that. And it's not even that he means it. It's just how it is.
Yes, he's just very simple, and he's very corrupt, and he's very narcissistic. And so what I'm saying, it's not just him. It's also with the Republicans. You have to start asking the question, why are they doing this? And it's not the answer is not that it's a mistake and they're incompetent. That's not the answer. Today, when we had an episode where the police said, oh, my God, I drank a bleach in a shake and they were trying to kill us. Immediately, I said, that is BS. Like, you looked at the facts of the situation and clearly they were lying. But everybody else automatically thinks well of the police, think they're trying to do the right thing, and well, maybe somebody was trying to. No, they were lying. And it took about 3 hours for the police union to come out and say, well, this was a big mistake.
Yeah.
They were just playing the same games they always play, and they realized they weren't going to get away with it this time.
Too many people watching. But today we found out that evidently Trump believes we have an AIDS vaccine. which again is another reason that I look at this guy and say he doesn't belong anywhere near the position that he's in, because this is one of those moments where I know you like to think you know something, but not so much.
Well, and going back to Putin guiding him, there's no way Trump could be doing these things by himself. He's mentally not with it. He's not just not smart, but he's got dementia. I mean, you don't have to be a first-year medical student to look at him and go, this guy's freaking demented. So he's got dementia. He's not functioning well. He's got bowel and bladder issues. He's got proprioception issues, balance issues, vision issues, tremor issues. Like, he has significant neurological decline that should prevent him from being president. But he's just not smart enough to be doing all this. He's getting guidance, and when he gets the guidance, he sticks with it.
Yeah, so do we know who?
He needs to.
Do we have any clue who's doing this? Is it Jared? Are you sticking with Putin, or is it Jared or somebody? Ivanka? Who? Thoughts?
Good point about Jared. I mean, Jared certainly seems to be a key figure, and he's certainly interfacing with the Saudis a lot. But the one thing, again, I go to, what do you know for a fact? I know for a fact, this has been reported many, many times, that he's having private conversations with Putin with no one else on the line.
Right.
That's extremely dangerous. Putin is not demented. He's clever. He's a mobster. He's plotting against us. So to have a demented goofball on the phone with Putin with nobody there to stop him from making a mistake is really concerning.
Yeah, I can just hear the heads of my conservative listeners exploding by having their president, or actually our president, at this moment, he's the office holder, being called a demented goofball. I can just hear their heads exploding.
Well, that's very interesting, because I've heard from several leaders, I'm talking about governors, et cetera, they're literally calling Obama for guidance right now. We're functioning without a president, and they're just trying to say, what the heck? They're scared. They're like, this is all on their shoulders, and they don't know what to do, and there's nobody to ask. And
right.
The last person that was president is alive and well, and you can call him on the phone. So sadly enough, we're rudderless. Kushner's running things behind and probably Bannon is running things behind the scenes, and we're crashing into walls right and left.
Yeah, it's a sad thing. I wanted to get your thoughts on yesterday's announcement by the FDA that they've ended the emergency use of the hydroxychloroquine and the chloroquine, citing things that you've said numerous times in this program, the heart problems that come along with it. Are we surprised by that?
A lot of doctors are just as blind as the rest of society in the mob infiltration of our pharmaceutical companies for years now. And this clearly, the heads of those pharmaceutical companies had to be complicit in this push to get hydroxychloroquine sold to the American public before they figured out it didn't work. There's no way that Trump or anybody else could have pulled this off without their complicity. So, I've talked at length for years now on different things that are happening in the pharmaceutical industry, like fighting for, like, say, nitroglycerin, a drug that everybody needs when they're having a heart attack. You gotta have it, right?
Right.
And then they play little games with shortages to try to get the price pushed up, and they kill people doing it. This has been going on for probably 15 years now. No sane person does that. That's not regular business practice. That's
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 capitalism. That's good American business.
I think it's more than that. I mean, some of these guys have gone to jail. It's not just they're pushing for more money. They're doing illegal things. When you extort human lives, that's illegal.
Yeah, I'm with you.
And they passed that line a long time ago.
I wanted to get your thoughts on this new miracle cure, evidently coming out of the UK. This dexamethasone.
Dexamethasone. Yes. So we give steroids. I don't understand. I didn't read the whole story, to be honest with you, because I looked at it and I said, they're saying give steroids and they do a lot better. Well, hello. We already do that. This is the standard of care. You give steroids to people in respiratory distress who have a lot of inflammation and secretions.
Right, because when I get my upper respiratory infection, and if it gets really, really bad, my doctor gives me a steroid.
Hello. Now I will say, when this first came out, and again, something is weird about this. So again, look at the facts. Don't look at what they're saying. Early on, there was this weird story coming out of China that said, don't give steroids to these patients. And that seemed odd. It seemed against common sense. It's against what we normally do. But for about 2, 3, 5 days, we were all talking about that. And then somebody else did a little bit of a short study and said, no, give steroids. So we went back to giving steroids. And then all of a sudden, this drug comes out, and it's like a miracle drug. Something is not right there. Something is very not right there.
No, as we've been saying for a while, there's going to be a bunch of these miracle cures, and because we're, look, as I say all the time, even a drowning man will even grab an anchor. If it's the last opportunity to grab for something, it's going to take you down. They're going to grab for it too.
We already give this, though. We already give this. That's right. What, like they made a story out of it when it's not a story. That's the story, I think.
Gotcha. Last question I've got for you. I don't know if you're a football fan at all, but this Dallas Cowboy running back Ezekiel Elliott evidently has tested positive for the COVID-19, and he tweeted out a simple question, one word, HIPAA. Which, because he didn't tell anybody, his agent didn't tell anybody, nobody was supposed to know. Is this a time where HIPAA protections should be given to people who are testing positive for this?
Oh, right. I mean, HIPAA protections should be given to everybody. They were invented. The HIPAA law was passed without anybody knowing what was happening. It was passed through by Republicans who were pushing really hard to digitalize the medical system before we were ready. And they want to make sure their records weren't going to end up in the headline news. Like right away they could see that was an issue. Well, here we are. There's no way to control it. Anybody in the hospital who cared for him or had any access to the chart in any way could have been the person that reported this. But I think the bigger story is that kind of means the NFL season's not going to go well.
Yeah, no, again, I was going to get to that as well, but my first thought is, in this moment of pandemic, in this moment of is this something that we should have the privacy to hold to ourselves and then end up knowingly going out and infecting people?
Well, I mean, there are people. We had an episode today where a woman went to Walmart just to pick some things up, wore a mask, and some right-wing person got offended by it and backed their car up to her, bumped into her, got too close to her, and then ultimately spit on her. A police report was made, but I really, based on the behavior of people I see just out on the street who are Trump supporters, I think this is going to be common. I think people, even if you don't have the virus or you don't know if you do, and you spit on somebody else, I think that's going to start to be a form of assault. And the police and their legal system is going to be inundated with cases of this kind of behavior. It's really, really bad.
See, why don't we ever see cops showing up beating those people up?
And I said, we used to punch Nazis. I don't know.
Grab a couple of these Karens and, give them a what for.
Exactly.
I don't know. Just bizarre times we live in. But Dr. Senholz, I appreciate the time. I appreciate your expertise and your willingness to keep us up to date. Thanks so much.
You're so kind. Thank you.
As always, our good friend Dr. Kelly Senholz. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
The only purpose this pipeline ultimately will serve is to boost the profits of its developers.
U.S. Supreme Court clears the way for controversial fracked gas pipeline.
Once it's out in the environment, it might get smaller and smaller, and even to the point where it's unseen by the human eye, but it still persists in the environment.
Microplastics are raining down on our national parks. Plus,
foods like bacon and donuts previously outlawed would be fair game to lure and shoot brown bears.
Trump administration accelerates resource extraction and cruel wildlife hunting practices on the public's lands.
Bacon and donuts. All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
You can't build a wall high enough around your home. You keep pollution out.
That's fine, Joe. But can you build a high enough wall around the Electoral College to keep Donald Trump out? That's all we really want to know. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, 2 big rulings from the U.S. Supreme Court regarding the environment.
Oh, indeed. A major ruling from the stolen U.S. Supreme Court on Monday. In a blow to conservationists and landowners, the Supreme Court cleared the way for the controversial proposed Atlantic Coast Pipeline, a fracked natural gas project to be built underneath the Appalachian Trail in Virginia. The court overturned a lower court ruling deciding 7-2 that, yes, the Forest Service does have the authority to approve permits even on protected national park lands. The pipeline itself still has more permitting battles ahead, but legal experts say this ruling could make pipelines in other national parks more likely. On the plus side for the environment, the Supreme Court allowed to stand a lower court ruling that blocked gold miners in Oregon from using a controversial extraction technique called suction dredge mining in federally protected streams. It's effectively vacuuming riverbeds to extract gold, degrading water quality and habitat. Water law experts say the ruling could have broad implications for other Clean Water Act regulations governing mining. Meanwhile, the Trump administration is racing the red light to roll back as many environmental and public health protections as possible before the November presidential election.
The red light of him getting thrown out of office?
One hopes.
We'll see.
Trump Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue issued a broad memo on Friday directing the U.S. Forest Service to prioritize the extraction of natural resources from the public's lands, national forests, and grasslands. The memo makes it clear that resource exploitation, logging, mining, drilling, and grazing is now the primary focus of the Forest Service, and any environmental reviews that are required by law should be curtailed to manage the forest, but they're turning it into a smash and grab, it seems, to strip the place before they get kicked out.
Racing the red light.
The Trump administration has also overturned an Obama-era ban on cruel hunting practices, like using donuts soaked in bacon grease to bait hibernating bears out from their dens to kill them, shooting swimming caribou from a boat, and targeting wild animals from airplanes. That is all legal again. And a heads up for voters in Florida, Politico reports that the Trump Interior Department plans to fulfill yet another item on the oil and gas industry's wish list by expanding drilling off the coast of Florida, even though it's mightily opposed by both Democrats and Republicans in the state because oil spills are bad for tourism. The trick is that Trump plans to hold off on the announcement until after the November election to avoid blowback in a swing state.
I don't even want to think what's going to happen between November 3rd and January 20 of next year if Donald Trump loses this election.
In other news...
But I do enjoy thinking about him losing this election.
In other news, microplastic rain is pouring down on our national parks. That's according to a new Utah State University study that estimates more than 1,000 tons of tiny airborne fragments of non-biodegradable plastic, the equivalent of 130 million plastic water bottles, rains down each year on national parks and wilderness in the American West alone.
Really?
Transported transported from urban areas on air currents like dust, then washed out by rain into soil and water. The researchers say they were surprised, trying to study how wind blows nutrients into ecosystems, but instead they found plastics in every single sample.
Wow, plastics raining from the sky.
Finally, some good news, at least for Germany. Germany has set a target for all of its gas stations to install electric car chargers, and it's putting up funding to help build out a national electric vehicle charging network. It's a lifeline for gas station owners to be able to survive the transition to all electric cars, and it's a major component of Germany's coronavirus recovery plan to invest in green infrastructure to create jobs while solving climate change.
Very cool. Why does all the good stuff always happen in Germany? Check that. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, as I've been saying all day, the reality is the executive orders that he put out today, as I said from the beginning, tone deaf at best, making things worse at worst. The image that I saw, the very first thing I saw, him surrounded by cops, one big white guy with a cowboy hat, all applauding his executive order, going, there's nothing in here, in my view, that's going to be helpful. In fact, it's going to only make things worse. Here to share some thoughts on the executive orders and where we are as a country. And as there's chaos in the street, I've asked Chris Voss to come talk with us. Chris is the host of the Chris Voss Show, one of the top 50 Forbes-rated hosts in the country. He runs the Chris Voss Network, which has a number of really fantastic podcasts. Hope folks will take a look at that. Chris, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me on the show, Rick. Am I calling number 18? Did I win the Leonard Skinner tickets?
That you most certainly are. Look, at the end of this, I would love to have that conversation. I would love to be in a world where we just joked around about stuff like that.
Yeah, well, it's about the only comedy we can find these days.
And that's the sad reality. I mean, you look at the dog and pony show that happened today, and I don't know what you thought, but as I watched it unfold, I'm going, this is just going to make things worse.
I'm starting to believe we're living in an alternate universe. Like, seriously, like we're the wrong universe. Like, we're the messed up one. That's because I watched, like you said, I watched what happened, and yeah, he had the police unions up there. He had all the thing. What's interesting is he met with some of the victims' families privately in the White House, but he left them all in the building, I guess, or something. And he just said, well, we'll go out and do the show of force thing.
Yeah, and that's the wrong part of this. Now, there's I got a couple emails from people going, well, you expect too much of him. There's no, as I've said, there's no single silver bullet here. There's no quick fix to something that has been going on for decades. And I guess there's part of me that goes, maybe not an outrageous claim. Maybe I do expect too much.
No, I don't think. I mean, the guy's the president of the United States. He's technically the most powerful man in the world. I mean, technically, that job is supposed to be the most powerful man in the world. Let's put it that way. Right now, the only most powerful thing in the world right now on that man is his diaper filled. So his diaper filling.
I don't want to
ability.
think about that.
Yeah, but watching him, did you watch the word salad sandwich of dementia that came out of his mouth during that thing?
Yeah, but that again is another one of those moments where it's just him being him.
And it's really sad that we've dropped this low at a bar. I mean, you and I probably remember. You remember Sununu? I can't remember what.
John Sununu.
John Sununu, and he flew too many times, one time too many or something on a executive jet. He was out. You think of all the people you've seen jettisoned from administrations to keep any sort of implication of corruption, and these guys just revel in it.
as you know, we have our friend Sarah Kenzio are on quite often, and she says, they love the fact that they're doing it. They love to rub your nose in the fact that they're getting away with it.
And this isn't American. This isn't. We're Americans. We're supposed to help each other out. We're supposed to lift each other up. We're supposed to work together. Yes, we have differences of opinion and maybe how we go about doing that. But this is supposed to be America, and this new divisiveness thing that they brought into the thing, and they're just winning on divisiveness. Really, when it comes down, well, I don't know they're winning, but they're just running the game on divisiveness. I mean, they don't have any policy.
Nope.
In fact, they just restamped the 2016 policies they had and rebranded them. They're not doing anything for policy. In fact, when they came into office, they didn't have policy ready. But I think the one thing that they're missing is there's going to be people in the streets for a long time with protests, because we got a lot, 42 million people jobless.
And I think they don't have anything to do. And you're right. But here's the thing. And I like the fact that you brought up the fact that there's no policy initiative here, because there really is nothing coming out of this administration on any level. They got their tax cuts, which is all they really wanted, and they've packed the courts with crazy people, even though this week it kind of jumped up and bit them in the behind on the LGBTQ case. There's nothing there. There's really nothing to conservative ideology.
Yeah, I mean, what are they doing to repair? And this is why you see people like Rick Wilson and his band from the Lincoln Project. You see, Morning Joe used to be, he used to be a conservative. I think he's still technically conservative, but he's not a Republican anymore. But you can see why these are conservatives who are leaving the party, and they're just going, hey, man, this is just a Banana Republic sort of operation that's going on.
Right. But here's the thing. Are the Democrats all that much better? Are they going to be much better? I mean, the things that people are in the streets complaining about, they've been going on for decades. My entire lifetime, we've had these moments. And even before I was born, we've had these things flare up. And as a guest earlier pointed out, you go back to, virtually every time we've had one of these, it's been police treatment of minorities. It's the same thing, and we never address it. And today's executive order doesn't really address anything, and I don't see that anything's going to really get done without the Democrats really being bold.
I think so too, and I think you're right. I mean, we saw Joe Biden kind of pull back and go, well, and police unions are good. He realizes losing that union thing. Maybe we can have one of those things where they get into office and then they go after racial stuff. But I think there's going to have to be more that's going to be done. I think people are going to stay in the streets right up until the election. I mean, a lot of the protests now is just turning anti-Trump.
Right.
I mean, they're angry about everything.
No, as they should be. Look, you've got a generation of people who are completely left behind, saddled with mass amounts of student loan debt, no job opportunities. The inequality in this country is growing by leaps and bounds, and in the minority communities, it's been that way for since the beginning of the country, just about. We've done nothing to address that. So in my view, you can't fix our policing problems until you fix all of the other problems, all of the other societal ills of housing, of employment, of health care, of education. All of that has to be part of it. You can't just go, oh, we got to fix the policing part of it.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have, I think in July, the rent seals and the payments for, I think, your college education. I'm not for sure on that, but I know there's stuff that runs out in July, and Mitch McConnell and others aren't interested in doing anything. That's going to keep people in the streets. You keep 44 million Americans angry, hot, and bothered like they are. They're going to, this feels like when I was a kid with Nixon, man, seeing the riots in the streets over Vietnam, and these are some angry people. In fact, I read a report today that came out that measured consumer happiness, and my apologies for not being able to cite who the origin of it is.
Now, University of Chicago.
Yeah, and they said we're as unhappy as we were in 1972. So there you go.
And that's on top of yesterday's Gallup poll that came out that said the percentage of people who are saying that they're very proud or extremely proud to be an American is at the lowest level ever.
Yeah.
So you look at the fact, global pandemic, massive unemployment, chaos in the streets. insane leadership, or demented leadership, or criminal leadership, or kleptocratic leadership. Name the direction you want to go. It's not surprising.
Yeah, it's and I just opened my email to see my city, Las Vegas. We reopened, and suddenly we're seeing the casinos flooded with people not wearing masks. Everyone's just like lollygagging, like whatever. And today we just hit a new record of viruses. You're seeing that in Texas, Arizona, North Carolina, South Carolina. You're seeing in Alabama is getting crazy with Montgomery, and along the lines, it's kind of funny to me with the police brutality and the racism. It's like with George Floyd, we told the cops, "Hey, this is about police brutality," and they went, "Hold my beer, I'll show you police brutality."
Yeah. No, really. I mean, if you look at some of these videos coming out, is in Philadelphia, you had the one guy who they got him on video just cracking people with his stick and in the most outlandish way possible. So when they fired him and they charged him with a crime, they came out with his name strong, so that they could raise money for his criminal defense. I mean, again, hold my beer. We're going to make this worse.
Yeah, there's somebody, I think it's the Richmond police commissioner. He's resigned today because one of his deputies drove through some protesters again. Just run them over, protesters. You can see the video. But I think coronavirus is exposing the cracks in everything. Like it is showing us how broken we are. And we've all kind of known we're broken and things aren't kind of working, but we're, kind of like throw some more grease in those clackety gears. But it's bringing everything down. Healthcare, you're going to start seeing people run out of their COBRAs. They can't pay their COBRAs, so their healthcare is diving. We're going to see, we're not even in a second wave. We haven't even finished the first. We're going to have probably a second wave, and it's going to be bad. And I will be surprised if Trump makes it through the election. I mean, he's going to try and cheat like hell, but I don't think he's going to make it.
Yeah, for me, it comes down to how many of these states, can cover up, and how many of them can claim other causes of death to keep the numbers artificially low, and how much they can pump in to prop the economy up. To me, this is still up in the air. And the sad reality is, as a country, we're still this divided that this election is, in my view, still up in the air.
Well, when we hit November, in fact, this is going to start happening next month, probably in August, it'll come heavy, the bankruptcies. So we're going to start seeing the personal bankruptcies. I saw a lot on Twitter yesterday, business owners talking about how they're in malls, they can't open, they're filing bankruptcy for the first time in their life. I remember 2008, like everything's coming back from 2008 when I lived in Las Vegas and we hit the wall hard with the housing crash.
Right.
But this is worse because at least with the housing crash, you could go out and you go to the store and spend money. You can go to restaurants and you can go to the casino still. This is like everything brought to a standstill. And I think it's going to be very ugly. I'm hoping it's going to be a bloodbath for the GOP because they deserve this for everything they've done. In fact, Mitch McConnell's written to the judges saying, "Hey, we know that it's most likely we're going to be in the desert for like 40 years after this. But if you're thinking about resigning your judgeship, retiring,
do it now.
Right?
So we can ram through a bad replacement."
They freaking know. They're basically cleaning the house. They're going to clean everything out, just like you see in banana republics and everything else. I mean, I don't. Whoever's the next attorney general is going to have so much work to do at bringing criminal charges against so many people. And now you're seeing Mnuchin. He won't tell you what he did with $500 billion.
Yeah, we know where it is. It's in the Cayman Islands. But here's the thing, and this is what you said here a second ago is they're going to be in the desert for the next 40 years. I thought that in 2008. I thought they had so badly screwed the economy up. So many people lost their jobs. So many people lost their homes, lost their savings, lost their retirements. And I thought, there's no way we're going to see a Republican administration for at least 20 years. And not only did we get a Republican administration, we got the worst possible Republican administration.
Yeah, it seems like they're getting worse every time, actually. I wish it was the other way around. But yeah, I mean, it's just this has to be a bloodbath, and I think a lot of conservatives, also not a Greg Wilson and George Conway, And I mean, their attitude is we have to kill the party to get it to live again. We have to destroy it. It has to die, and then we've got to resurrect it and try and make it anew. Because it's really Trump's party, really, when it comes down to it.
That's the crazy part of this. So let me ask you, and going back to what we're seeing, in the streets, because I've been asking people, what's the vision forward? I mean, I'm getting a lot of people saying we need to defund the police, we need to disband police departments, we need to do all of these different things. I'm curious where you see things going.
It's going to get really ugly and dark before it gets better, and it's all going to probably peak around November. I think we're going to see more riots in the street. The police unions are now signaling, LAPD and other, they're signaling, okay, we're willing to work, we're willing to talk. We've needed to do this. I hate the term defund the police, but we've needed to put other things into homeless people, people with drug addiction. We need, sending someone with a badge and a gun just accelerates the situation. It's like taking, it's like going to a little burning fire and then throwing gas on it. And if you ever watch Cops, you've seen when the police show up, and the police are largely good people, but they show up with badges and they show up with guns. And immediately, if you're in a domestic situation or just a crazy homeless person who has mental health issues or someone who's on drugs, it accelerates the thing. And then you hear people dying. I mean, if you've probably seen like me, people are just homeless guys in the street suddenly getting shot dead by like 8 cops, and you're like, what was the danger there? So, and racial, I mean, if anything, if you really think about it, what Trump is getting is his own medicine. I mean, he came into this bringing race baiting, race wars, the white nationalist race war agenda. He brought all that into this sort of thing. He said, we're not going to be PC anymore. I mean, he basically brought all the racists right out of their closet, and now it's turning on him, and probably rightly so. I mean, this is how it's going to be. But economically, it's going to be bad. If you're out there and you're a Republican, you really need to be thinking about your family, your job, and where you're going to be like beyond the election. And you're going to need leaders that are empathetic, that care about your family and care about healthcare, because these guys are still trying to take away people's healthcare in the pandemic. It's just,
there's still a case before the Supreme Court. I mean, I'm waiting for them to completely undo the Affordable Care Act at the worst possible moment. And to your point, all of the anti-government people, they're destroying our ability to react at a time when people need government the most.
Yeah. And we're going to need, I mean, the Democratic Party's going to have to go in, and they're going to have to take these givebacks that they gave to all the billionaires. I just saw the other day that like the billionaires, in spite of the COVID-19 shutdown, have made like made $500 million.
Yeah.
They're always making money.
$500 billion.
$500 billion? Was it? Oh my God.
It was 500 billion.
Yeah. So they're doing fine. They're always going to do fine, but it's the rest of us that are going to have problems. But we need to, I look at a lot of what Johnson did in helping poor people and helping people that needed a leg up. We're going to need a lot of social programs, whether you like it or not.
Yeah. And this is where, my vision, and I talked about this a little bit yesterday. My vision has always been do away with all of the handout programs, do away with all of that stuff, and create job programs. Mm-hmm. Every person should have a job. I've always believed in the idea if you want to eat, you got to work. And if the private sector can't or won't create enough jobs, that's where the public sector has to step in and create good family-sustaining wage jobs that people can support themselves and their families on, and be able to make their way, have dignity, have respect, and ultimately be able to live.
When you think about it, we have, I think what they were saying was like $4 to $6 trillion of infrastructure problems that we have in this country.
Yep.
There's a lot of problems we have in this country, and especially if you defund the police and start putting money into social services and other things. You think of all the employees of those things: homeless people, marriage counselors, courts for domestic violence, all those people that can afford having that funding spread out a lot more. When you really look at what the police have been doing and the racial aspect of the police, you really see why we have these giant prisons that are racially biased and they're filling. They become their own sort of conglomerate,
Right,
machinery.
but here's the thing, Chris, and this is where my position is. We during the Clinton era, we put 100,000 cops on the street. We didn't put them into lily white neighborhoods in the middle class areas. We put them into poverty ridden areas, and we over policed poverty ridden areas where, unfortunately, a lot of minorities live. This was that South, and look, the minority communities wanted policing. They wanted to be safe from criminals. But what ended up happening is you had all this over policing to where every little bit thing turned into an arrest, a charge, going through the process, getting a record, and just this whole horrible snowball that caused the situation that we're in now.
And it just gave racist police officers. Not all police officers are racist, but it just gave racist police officers, license to rock and roll and do what they want. I mean, I grew up poor. I when I was 18, I was always getting like turn signal tickets and speeding tickets. This is back in the age of the revenue ticket age, where they would hire 5 billion cops and then defund them.
That's
they
changed.
The shit out of everybody. Yeah.
That's changed.
I don't know that it's changed, but I know what that's like in urban communities. I don't get pulled over now because I'm an old white guy, right?
Right.
And I actually use my turn signals now, but you'd have like $100 ticket, and then it'd become a $400 warrant, and then it'd become 4 warrants, and
yeah, no, it's a horrible thing. It just is what it is. So last question I've got for you, because at the end of this, it is about November. What's the message that comes out of this for folks who aren't affected? Because look, a lot of people I talk to go, oh, it's great. The people in the streets, they're protesting. Yeah, whatever. What about the people that aren't affected by this? What's the message for them out of this?
I don't think there's anyone that's not going to be affected by it. Even billionaires. I mean, I think everyone's going to be affected by the coronavirus, by the vote. I mean, we're going for a full collapse. We're on the last train to the thing. And if he wins re-election, I mean, game over, man. Just toss the Constitution in the toilet. Call it a day.
I'm right there with you. Chris, I appreciate the time, man. As always, great stuff. Make sure you check out the Chris Voss Show. We'll make sure we get links out on how you can take a look at that. One of my favorite guys on YouTube and elsewhere. Chris, thanks so much, man.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Let's take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1836. That was the day that the London Working Men's Association was founded. Skilled craftsmen started the organization. William Lovett, a cabinet maker, and a publisher by the name of Henry Hetherington were 2 of the original founders. Their aim was to promote the rights of the working class. 2 years later, the group drafted the People's Charter. The document outlined a demand for 6 reforms aimed at making the government more inclusive of the working class. One reform was universal suffrage for all males over the age of 21. Another was ending the requirement that members of Parliament hold property, which excluded most British people from standing for elections. The charter also called for the establishment of fairer parliamentary electoral districts, holding of annual elections, and allowing for a secret or anonymous ballot. The final item was payment for those elected to Parliament. Since it was an unpaid office, people who could not afford to go without a salary were practically shut out of running. Those who supported these measures came to be known as Chartists. The movement grew and garnered support. More than 1 million people signed a petition for the charter. Parliament, however, ignored the petition, but the movement continued to grow. It inspired newspapers, rallies, and even poetry. One poem published in 1841 included the lines, "'Tis the voice of the people I hear on high. It peals o'er the mountain, it soars to the sky. Its shock, like the earthquake, shall fill with dismay the hearts of the tyrants and sweep them away." Chartism as a movement lasted for 2 decades. But it was not until 1918 that all British men won the right to vote. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
You know, as I've been saying, I don't think there's a silver bullet to any of this. And look, being a cop's a tough job. I don't not acknowledge that. But there's a lot of problems that are beyond their control, and a lot of problems they make on their own as well. You know, I've had moments where policemen have escalated situations that didn't need it. And that's this, you know, that macho testosterone image that comes out that, you know, we're in charge and you're gonna follow us. And those are not the people you need. At least I don't think you need them in every situation. Especially when you're talking about, you know, and look, I've had conversations with all of this with people about policing and their interactions with police. And, you know, a lot of folks, you know, are ambivalent. I've gotten a lot of negative comments of treatment. And it comes back to a mindset. It comes back to a mindset of black and white thinking. And not, I'm talking about, you know, people, I'm talking about, you know, the absolutes. It's absolutely right or it's absolutely wrong. There's no shades of gray. There's no leeway. And I remember as a kid growing up that, you know, even in the neighborhood I grew up in, there was always a little bit of leeway. You know, if a cop didn't want to deal, he'd smack you upside the back of the head and tell you don't do it again. That's never going to happen today. But for me, it's much bigger than just what happens with the interaction between police. There's so much more that goes into this, and it's, you know, the inequality in housing, the inequality in employment, and it got me thinking, about a whole bunch of things that I've come across over the years, and we're at a moment in our history where, as Chris pointed out, we're kind of hitting the perfect storm of chaos. You've got possibly another spike in the pandemic, which could lead to another shutdown and more unemployment. We're going to hit, this summer, a bunch of people filing bankruptcies, a bunch of businesses not opening. Because look, I go around and I'm going, oh wow, they're not reopening. And, oh wow, they're not reopening. And here where I'm at, it's green. Everything should be open. And there are a bunch of places that aren't. And that's not good. And with another spike, what happens? And this is where I keep saying, as a government, as policymakers, I want someone who's going to be thinking big and bold. And I know Trump's not that guy. I mean, you look at the executive order today, and there's nothing bold in that. We need transformational leadership. We need another FDR. We need someone who's going to understand the problems that people face and begin to change the dynamics of our society. I was talking about housing with a friend a few days ago, and I said, when people came back from World War II, the federal government funded massive housing developments. They funded massive amounts of Levitt towns all across the country. The builders made a little bit of money. The houses were cheap. Families got to move into them, and it helped massively to build and create that middle class. The same thing could be done in minority communities, giving people the opportunity of just something simple like home ownership, and the dignity of and the pride of actually having a stake in the game, and also building some personal wealth down the road. Because what we're also seeing is a spasm of just mass poverty in this country, and where the poverty falls. Will we see anything to move us in a positive direction out of Trump and the Republicans? No, because they don't believe government can do anything. They don't believe government should do anything. And anytime government does do something, they're there to booger it up and put massive roadblocks in the way. That's been their role for 70 years now. So is it any surprise to us that they're still doing it? Not in my view, it's not. It just is what it is. I'd love to hear your thoughts, though. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Am I off my rocker? Am I crazy? Or do you think, there's a point? Rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com is where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.